My name is Lynn Farmeyer. I'm not really good at Zoom. Can you see my presentation, Crystal? Did I?
Yes.
Okay, I got the right screen. Good. Um, so I'm not too sure. You might. I'm not too sure. I know what you're seeing. You may see a little bar at the top. I apologize if that's not really supposed to be there. But anyway, I live near Kansas City, Missouri. I'm a first generation shepherd. My wife and I bought our first sheep back in 1997. The farm we live on has been in the Farmeyer family for over 125 years. I am primarily a corn and soybean farmer, but we do have a small cattle herd, and then we also have a Katahdin sheep flock. I started submitting data to NSIP in 2001 and have ever since. I've been on the Katahdin board of directors. I've been chairman of NSIP. I'm now the immediate past chairman. And I also serve the sheep industry as Region 4 ASI director on the ASI executive board. So that's a little bit about me. And so we're going to run through, if I can get everything to advance. Go. We're going to, you all see that little black bar at the top of my screen?
Nope.
Okay, good, good. Okay, so what I'm going to try to talk about tonight is why quantitative genetic selection can help you reach your goals. That's one thing we don't all have the same goals, and I think that's good. We should celebrate that. And so since we don't have the same goals for our flocks, our genetic selection criteria need to be different for each flock. And we'll talk about how we can help you with that. We'll talk a little bit about cost and time commitment, the importance of good data collection procedures, and that's mainly what we call contemporary groups. But maybe if we've got time, I'll show you how Pedigree Master works, which is a free software program that you can get when you register with NSIP. It's not great, but it is free. And then we'll look at some real data because Crystal has been generous enough to share some of her data, and we'll look at that tonight. And then hopefully there's time for questions and answers. And so, I believe that NSIP can give you results that you can trust, and we'll dig into that tonight. So what's the mission? Very simply, NSIP, we strive to provide predictable, economically important genetic evaluation information to the American sheep industry by converting your performance records and the performance records of other flocks in your breed into relevant decision-making tools. Unlike cattle, where every breed, or there's some syndicates of breeds that share their genetic analysis, NSIP does the genetic analysis for the entire sheep industry. It's not, each breed does not do their own analysis. So an estimated breeding value is just simply science-based, industry-tested measurements of heritable traits that can be tracked and measured. And we'll dig into that just a little bit more, but we're basically, I like to tell people, the breeding value of an animal is set in stone at conception. And everything we do after that is an attempt to determine what that true breeding value is so that we can make informed breeding decisions. Okay, so what is NSIP not? Okay, NSIP is not a marketing ploy. And the reason for that is I want to make more accurate selections in my own flock as well as using it as a tool to place rams and ewes in the correct flock of my potential customers. I've turned customers away because I didn't have the animal that fit their selection criteria. And so do I use it for marketing? Yes, I do. But is it just a ploy? No. Does an animal with EBVs, does that make them a better animal? No. There are animals with estimated breeding values that are really bad animals. And so, but I think the goal is to find the best animals using EBVs, and then also then place those animals into flocks that need them to so those flocks can meet their goals. And it's only one selection tool. Confirmation is still important. We have to use our eyes. I like to say, you have to use both estimated breeding values and your eyes. We want 4 legs. We want them to be able to breed. Poor pasterns, we don't measure that in NSIP, so that's something you have to search. You have to look at the animal. I've seen animals in show rings that had 2 uneven testicles. They would not, honestly, at least in the Katahdin breed, they should not have even been registered, and yet they were still in the show ring. And that's nothing against the show ring, but we have to use our eyes. We have to use common sense. And then hair coat. We do not measure the quality of a hair coat. That's for you to determine with your own visual evaluation. And so I say, doesn't it make sense to use all of our available resources? We need to use our eyes, and we need to use science to select the best animals for our flocks. So what's measured? What's the minimum Yates? This kind of gets back to, you don't have to collect everything. But here's this is the list of minimum things to select. We need to know the sire and the dam of the lambs. We need to know the lamb's birth date. We need to know the birth type, rearing type. And then we need to take a weaning weight. And I hate that term, even though I will probably use it interchangeably tonight. I'm trying to say 60-day weights more than I'm saying weaning weights. You do not have to wean at 60 days. But we need to take a weight at 60 days. And that's when, and when I say 60, it's not 60 for every animal. So you're not out there weighing every day. But when you have a group of lambs that were born in about a 34-day period of time, when the average age of that group is 60 days, then you weigh all the lambs in that group. And then a calculated trait is maternal weaning weight. It's also known as milk. Some people call it milk, but that's calculated. And we're not going into the weeds tonight on how that's calculated. But so really, you're looking for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 things that you really need. And then everything else after that's optional. Your birth weight is optional. Your lambing ease is optional. Early post weaning would be about 120 days. A weight 120 days is optional. Hogget, I don't know, we use that term a lot here in the United States, but it's basically 18 months. And then adult weights. And I encourage everyone to take a weight when you're dividing your ewes up into your breeding groups. That's probably the best time to capture an adult weight. Fecal aid counts, we can take them at about 60 and 120 days of age. Back fat thickness and eye muscle depth are those are hard traits to collect. They're expensive traits to collect. I have done it in the past. Robert has helped me, but it's required, and most people do not do it. I think really though, scrotal circumference is probably one we should collect more. It's not that hard. You can collect that at about 120 or even 150 days of age if you still have a large group of ram lambs on the farm. And scrotal circumference is not only good for fertility, but it helps you identify your early maturing rams versus your later maturing rams. But anyway, so everything over here on the right are extra traits. If you want to collect them, that's great. If you don't sweat it. It's not a big deal. Most of your results will come from these traits on the left-hand side. I know St. Croix, kind of like Katahdins, we're focusing on fecal egg counts, and so probably a lot of people in your breed will want to do fecal egg counts. But it's, again, I focus, your first year, focus on what's, let's not bite off more than we can chew. So what do these traits tell me? Well, like I said in my introduction, EBVs denote the true breeding value of the individual animal. It can be used to predict a lamb's performance, but I prefer that we look further down the road into the future. We want to know the breeding value of that animal as a potential breeding animal. And so, so here's a little brief example. Let's say you have Ram A and Ram B. Ram A has a post-weaning weight EBV of 4, and Ram B has a post-weaning weight, and again, these are about 120-day measurements, of 0. Well, the difference is 4 kilograms, and the analysis is done in Australia, so we're on the metric system. But guys, when it comes to weights, a breeding, we don't have to worry about it a whole lot, because a breeding value is actually double an estimated progeny difference. So if you're used to cattle, they have EPDs, which is expected progeny differences, and we deal with EBVs, which is the breeding value. So anyway, to get to a progeny level, you need to divide by 2. And then to convert kilograms to pounds, you need to multiply by about 2. So it works, let's not get hung up on a bunch of decimal points. But anyway, the difference is 4 kilograms. And I explained here a little bit about EPDs and EBVs. But the bottom line is Ram A's offspring will gain about 4 pounds more from weaning to 120 days of age compared to Ram B. And that's basically how you use EBVs. You use them to compare 2 animals. I have 2 animals that have a great hair coat. I have 2 animals that have great feet soundness, great structure. I can't decide which one I want to buy. If post-weaning weight of 120-day weights are important to you, then choose Ram A. And if this is a trait that's not important to you and you're worried more about number of lambs born or number of lambs weaned, then let's look at those 2 traits and pick the best one. So I think sometimes we overcomplicate this, and I'm trying tonight to show you that we can keep it really simple. The power of EBVs is that they let us compare across management types. Okay, so, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we look at Crystal's data. Right now, Crystal's the only one that's submitting data in the St. Croix breed. And so basically for her, it's just a within flock selection tool. But as more people in the St. Croix breed submit data, and you have genetic linkages, and that's the important thing, there has to be some sort of a genetic linkage between flocks, then you can compare across flocks. And it truly, a lot of people get confused, and we'll talk about this in just a little bit. But you can compare grain-based operations with forage-based operations, and I'll explain why you can. But the real power of EBVs is that we can compare across flocks because, honestly, we don't all have the same management. We don't have the same weather. I mean, there's a lot of things why we cannot compare raw weights between flocks. So here's a short history lesson. This Dr. Henderson, he developed a statistical method known as best linear unbiased prediction. So you'll hear people say BLUP. And this hasn't been around that long. It was in 49. And basically what this model does, it allows you, if you're familiar with the science, research and trying to get published research and published in journals, they want to try to standardize everything, and you can't have differences in groups. All groups have to be 15 animals or whatever. BLUP allowed the statisticians then to start looking at uneven sizes of groups. So you could have one producer that has a contemporary group of 50 lambs and another with a contemporary group of 500 lambs, and you could actually have valuable statistics run between them. And you could also he figured out how to get a lot of these computations performed simultaneously. So they're mixed model equations, but they're also, I like to tell a lot of people, it's not just used for EBVs. It's used throughout all industries now, and it's a proven statistical method. So here's why we can trust the EBVs from either a grain, a farm that's pushing lambs really hard with grain, or another farm that's not pushing and is more forage based. Or at least in my case, poor forage based. Okay, I'm not a good grazer. I'll admit that to begin with. So farm 1 used Ram A. His progeny weighed 70 pounds average. Ram B's progeny averaged 60, and Ram C's 56. In farm 2, which was a less intensive operation, Ram I was at 53 pounds. That, again, average of his progeny. Ram B was average 45 pounds, and Ram Z 40. So you can see Ram B was used on both farms with about a 15-pound difference at, whatever weight these were that when they took these weights. And so definitely a difference in management. Maybe it was a difference in weather. We don't know, but we know there was a difference between the two farms. Okay, so we need to know that, okay, on farm 1, the average of all the lambs were 62 pounds. On farm 2, they were 46. And so then we actually take that average for the farm and divide it by the average weight of the progeny for each ram. And so Ram A, his offspring did 113% better than the average of that farm. Ram B was at 97%, and Ram C was a poor 90%. Okay, on the other farm, Ram Y was actually 115% better than average. Ram B was at 98, and Ram Z was 87. And so basically now let's just, and again, see, we're using percentages here. We're not using, from now on, we're not going to look at the raw weights of each farm. We're actually looking at the percentage, which ram was better based upon percentage. So Ram A was better than Ram B on farm 1 by 16%. Ram C was 7% worse than Ram B. Okay, Ram Y was 17% better than Ram B, and then Ram Z was a negative 11%. So now we can rank the rams. A lot of people would have chosen Ram A just simply because his progeny's weaning weight was 70 pounds, but actually Ram Y outperformed our reference sire by 1% compared to Ram A. So we can rank these rams now and say Y is the best, followed by A, followed by B, which was our reference sire. In this case, I mean, sometimes your reference sire will be your best one, but in this example, B was in the middle, and then C, and then the worst ram, at least for this trait, was Ram Z. And so I hope that short example calms some fears. that a farm that perhaps doesn't push growth as much, or perhaps does not push number of lambs weaned as much, can be compared fairly to another farm that does. And again, this is a simple example where we used the same reference sire in both flocks. It gets a lot more complicated when you use the son of a ram or the uncle of a ram, but as long as there's some sort of genetic linkage, this math can be done. So, okay, so now that we've done that, and I've shown, and I've said, well, ram, Y was the best because it was the biggest. Let me back up a little bit and calm some fears by saying that just, more isn't always better. And using EBVs is not going to screw up the breed. It can. What I like to say, though, is that EBVs will get you to your end goal faster. And if your end goal is wrong, it'll just help you get to the wrong place faster. And not to pick on the Holstein breed by any means, but that's single trait selection for pounds of milk. One thing they worry about. And they have certainly shrunk their genetic diversity. And there's probably a lot of other problems because they select for one thing. But I know at least within the Katahdin breed, and I think within the St. Croix, y'all are all selecting for something a little different. We have breeders in the Katahdin breed that focus on parasite resistance, and we have others that focus on weight, and we have others that focus on number of lambs weaned. And because we're all kind of focusing on something different, we're keeping that genetic diversity, and we're not trying to maximize any one trait. So if you do single trait selection, yes, you'll probably push any breed past a point that makes economic or biological sense. We've all seen it, but if we have a little common sense and we're selecting for balanced EBVs, or balanced animals, we can use EBVs to move us toward our goal. I like to, I run the sound system at my church. This is a Yamaha LS9 digital mixer, and I can come in here and I can make the choir or our contemporary worship service band sound really bad if I shove all of those sliders all the way up. To make them sound good, you can't have them all at the top. I don't know. My friend Michelle Canfield, she told me about a movie that I don't know why I missed it, but it's called now I can't think of it. But anyway, it's a spoof movie of a band, and they made all their amplifiers go to 11. And
is that Spinal Tap?
Thank you. Yes, Spinal Tap.
Welcome.
Yep, thank you. Actually, I guess you maybe had to live through the 80s to appreciate it. I don't know, but
yes, thank you, Lynn. I just admitted my age.
But anyway, I definitely admitted mine. And but yeah, so they were talking about, well, when we need more, we just turn it up to 11. And it's probably one of the funniest clips in the movie. Someone can YouTube it, but 11, even going to 10, is pushing everything to 10 isn't necessarily better. And so we want to pick the traits that are most important to your operation and your management style and focus on them. And so sometimes it may actually be backing off of a trait, and we can use EBVs to help you figure that out as well. Okay, so cost. Everyone wants to know what it costs. And so I just did a flock size of 50 here. This is actually the enrollment form. Anything that's in red is something that I've typed in here. So there's an enrollment fee of $100, regardless of the size of your flock. You take 50 ewes, and these are just breeding ewes, and times 250, so that'll be $125. And so the total enrollment for the year is 225. And like I said, you know, our analysis is done in Australia, but we have an office in north of Ames, Iowa. Rusty Burgett is our manager, and that $225 stays in the United States. We use it to pay Rusty's salary. We use to pay some geneticists to do some maintenance on the database and the traits that we have, and we also do some advertising. And so then we also applied for grants. Like right now, Dr. Ron Lewis from the University of Nebraska and a whole group of other researchers from across the United States are working on a multi-million-dollar research project involving 4 breeds, and it's called the GEMS project. But anyway, it's a very aggressive project to try to identify some new traits that we can offer in NSIP, but that's all done with grant money. And then there's data fees. Okay, so now the data fees are what you send to NSIP, but they're just passed on to Australia. And currently it's $3.50 a head. And the way that's calculated, well, number one, you'll see here, we ask you to prepay for at least 25 head. But for the year, 100 lambs out of these 50 ewes will cost you $350 because it's $350 per head. And that charge is assessed the first time you submit data on that lamb. But that's the only time that you will pay a data fee on that animal for the rest of its life. So you can submit your lambing crop records and pay your $350 per lamb. And then 2 months later, you can submit your 60-day weights, and there's no additional charge. When that ewe, if one of those ewe lambs is saved, you can just keep submitting lambing records for that ewe, and there's never an additional data fee for the animal. And so again, this money here stays in the United States to keep NSIP operating. This money here is passed, the $350 in this example is passed through to Australia for the analysis. So total for this 50 ewe flock, if you produce 100 lambs, you're going to pay about $575 that year. So I think my math is wrong. There we go. I corrected it on the next slide. Sorry about that. So 50 ewes producing 100 lambs, you're going to spend about $575. If you can get a 3% increase in weaning, that would be 3 more lambs. 65-pound lambs right now at $3, which I don't know, I think the market's a little high right now, but this would actually be low right now for many people. Those 3 lambs would bring you an extra $585. So just increasing your weaning percentage because you selected ewe lambs that, or if you selected ewes that had good EBVs for weaning percentage, you could pay for your cost here pretty fast. And that's not counting, that's just one trait. You could use, selecting for fecal egg counts, you'll use less wormer. If you want more growth, you can select faster growing lambs. And then also, again, it can be a marketing tool. I'm always careful to say it's not a marketing ploy. So here's what you get back for your money. And again, Crystal was really generous to share her data, very transparent here. She has 3 sires that she used last year. You can see up here that this report was dated July of 2023. And this number, I hope you can see my cursor, but that black number there, 643, that is the St. Croix number. So this is I want to say it's a 15 digit. I actually haven't counted it for a while.
16.
Anyway, 16, okay. It's 643. See, I know people need to keep me straight. 643 means it's a St. Croix. Crystal was flock number 3 that registered with NSIP. This animal was born in 2014, and then you know, there's different ways you can come up with these last numbers, but here I think this one's pretty simple. Melwood Farm in 2022, lamb number 30. You can see how many progeny and how many flocks each ram has produced in its lifetime. And then so BW is birth weight EBV. This maternal weaning weight would be, again, milk. Weaning weight, so here's one that, you know, this top ram is producing lambs that grow really fast compared to the other ones. But its fecal egg count numbers aren't nearly as strong because on fecal egg counts, we want negative numbers. The range on fecal egg count it's in %. So you can go as good as a negative 100%. And then you can be as bad as infinity on the top side, but practically, you know, I've seen a positive 600. Yeah, 133 would probably be a practical top or worse number. But anyway, and so this isn't uncommon either, folks. I mean, within the Katahdin breed, we like to brag about Katahdins are parasite resistant, and I think St. Croix like to say that too, rightfully so. But, you know, just this page right here shows that just because it's a St. Croix doesn't mean it's a parasite resistant animal. If you're going to say it's a parasite resistant animal, I really believe people need to be testing the animals for fecal egg counts to determine if it's truly a parasite resistant animal or not, because not all animals are. And then these numbers here will give you a number of lambs born % and number of lamb weaned %. And then this number here is an index that combines number of lambs born, number of lambs weaned, weaning weight, and milk. And it basically is an index set to 100 that is a % of, it'll tell you the pounds of lambs weaned per ewe lambing, not ewes exposed, but ewes lambing. So for all of the ewes lambing, this top one is going to produce about 1.4% more pounds of lambs weaned than average. So anyway, that's the sires. Then you get a list of all dams that lambed within that calendar year. One thing I want to point out here, and this may be getting just a little bit in the weeds, but this accuracy number that you can see in gray, there are no accuracies listed here because Crystal is the only one submitting data. So this means that she can only use these data, these results, to compare animals within her flock. As more of you join NSIP and as you share genetics and you become genetically linked, then you will have an accuracy number. And accuracy is simply a measure of the total amount of data that is backing the animal. Because NSIP, this BLUP analysis doesn't look at just the individual animal, but it's looking at sires and dams and aunts and uncles and siblings and half sibs. And it looks at basically all animals that are related to each other are used in the calculations to try to predict what that true breeding value is. And then once a ewe starts producing, or a ram starts producing progeny, that progeny data starts being weighted heavier than the ancestral data, because now we actually are able to measure what the breeding value is because we have progeny on the ground. So anyway, so my sheet will have accuracy scores here between 30 and, well, 100 would be perfect. And it's basically between 30 and 99 is the practical range. And the highly heritable traits will get higher accuracy scores faster. And the maternal traits, which are more lowly heritable, it takes more data to get high accuracy scores. But so you can sort through your U's this way. Whoops. And then, okay, then here's a sheet of the male progeny that Crystal had in 2023. And so this is where, if you're going to Crystal or another NSIP breeder, if you're coming to my place, what I tend to do, I pick out the animals that I believe are the best genetic animals on my flock. And then I walk in the pen and I cull anything that I don't like the looks of. And then when a potential customer comes, we look at this sheet, and if they want to focus on weaning weight, we're going to look at this animal right here. If they want to focus on parasite resistance, we're probably going to be down here on animal 28. Because I haven't produced a perfect animal that's at the top on every trait yet, and probably never will. And so we pick and choose based upon the priorities of my customers. So can we trust the EBVs? I'm just going to go over this again. Hopefully some of my previous examples have shown that you can. But one of the things I hear is, people cheat. Well, if you come to my farm, I can tell you any birth date in the world. And, you don't know if I'm telling the truth about the birth date of that lamb or not. And so, unfortunately, people do cheat. I would argue that with NSIP and EBVs, you don't want to cheat because, well, quite honestly, sometimes you get caught because an animal just simply doesn't perform the way it's supposed to. And if you start, and sometimes that happens because of bad luck. But when there's a pattern, people start talking and like, well, why doesn't Len Farmar's sheep ever, perform the way they're supposed to according to his EBVs? Well, maybe I am cheating. But here's, I think, the more important thing to think about. I'm using EBVs in my flock to select my replacement animals. And sometimes I'm using them to not only the replacement ewe lambs, but I'm selecting, sometimes I use my own sires in my flock. And the last thing I want to do is select something based upon bad data. So I'm really picky about having accurate data, truthful data, so that I can make the best decisions for my flock using these EBVs. And then hopefully that also helps my customers. So I use the data more than my customers do. And so really, I think the comments about cheating really just reflect an ignorance of how EBVs work. If you really understand it, you'll understand that I could cheat and make one animal look really good, but then I've actually lowered the EBVs for that trait for every other animal in that contemporary group. And so why would I do that? I've actually chosen, I think, to be part of the solution and not part of the crowd that complains. I like to use selection methods, not only EBVs, but I like to use my eyes. And this past breeding season, I used 5 rams from the states of Iowa, Georgia, Virginia, Arkansas, and Missouri. I make it a point to bring in new genetics from flocks that maybe I haven't tried before, that I think have numbers, traits that I'm selecting for to move my flock in the right direction. And sometimes I actually, like I said, I use rams for my own flock as well. But these 5 rams, some were raised on nothing but a forage-based operation. One was out of a feedlot. It was pushed really hard. And then a couple were kind of in between. And by having a variety of animals from different management groups or different management types, I actually can make the data more robust. So how can you participate? If you're a registered flock, you really need to have two or more sires that are single mated or single sire mated to your ewes. So your ewes would be divided into two groups, and you'd have one sire with one group and one sire with the other. It would be nice to get about 15 or more lambs per sire. Your lambing groups need to kind of be in 35-day increments. And, you know, if it's a 60-day increment, that's fine. Let's try to find a, maybe there was a point where you had a couple days where you didn't have any lambs that we could kind of draw a line and say, okay, the early ones are contemporary group 1, the later lambs will be contemporary group 2. And then I would encourage you to purchase, trade, sell, whatever, rams with other NSIP flocks. These genetic linkages are the key. And I understand biosecurity is a concern. Unfortunately, we don't do much AI in the sheep industry. So purchasing, trading, selling, Robert Walker, I don't know if he's still on. He and I have done some of that, and it really helps to keep the genetic diversity in the breed high, and it also helps build the robustness of the NSIP database. And so if you're a commercial flock, or if you're registered flocks with just one ram, that's fine. I think the best way to participate in NSIP is when you buy your breeding stock, say, show me the numbers. And just, you know, make sure. And again, I understand in the St. Croix right now, there's only one breeder submitting data, but as that group grows, support the people that are taking the time and spending the money to collect the data so that you can make an informed decision on your next breeding animal with quantitative genetics as well as visual selection. And so, you know, maybe the easiest way, you know, to make genetic progress is just to always call the bottom 20%. But then the next step would be, say, show me the numbers and support those flocks that are collecting the data. So that's my quick presentation. We've got time for questions, and would be glad to entertain any question or comment that y'all have.
Lynn, thank you very much. That was so helpful. I've heard, I went to my own Washington State sheep producers this past fall, and there's a lady with caracule or some unusual sheep, and she uses NSIP even though she's the only one in her breed. And it's still, just like what Crystal's finding out, it's still valuable to her. So when you don't, so it's not really, what do I want to say, a competition if you're a small breed. And so to me, I will use it as a competition with myself and within my flock to make decisions.
Thank you, Yates. And I think that you hit the nail on the head, and that's the proper use. You know, use it within your own flock, use it to find animals that fit your goals. Now, we're all human, and I will tell you that there are people that obsess within the Katahdin breed. There are people that obsess with that maternal index, and they want it as high as possible, or they obsess with growth, and they want to be known as the breeder with the fastest growing sheep. So you're going to see that. That's just human nature, but you are so correct that the best use is to be competitive with yourself to raise the type of animals that work in your management system.
Lynn, this is Jim Morgan.
Yep, Jim. Okay, well, okay, guys, let's for those that you don't know Jim Morgan, it's Dr. Jim Morgan, and Jim's in Arkansas. He's he was the chairman of NSIP for 10 or 12 years, and he was really the one that back in 2001 got a lot of Katahdin breeders involved in NSIP. So Jim, thanks for being on the call tonight.
The way I like to always put it is that you don't get into NSIP to show your sheep are best. You get in to find out how to make them better. And the people that get in trying to show that their sheep are best, get disappointed. It's where I want to know where the holes in my flock are. If I don't have as much milk, etc. If I'm lacking on parasite resistance, I want to know where to get it. And this will do that. And so it's definitely, I don't view it as competition for sure. I view it as how to make my sheep better.
Yep. Thanks, Jim. Okay, Lori had a couple questions in the chat. Let me see if I can tackle those. Okay, so looking at the NSIP data summary from Millwood Farms, what's the difference between WFEC and PFEC? Okay, so the first letter of any of these traits is the age bracket. So W is weaning, or as I would prefer to say, 60 days. You don't have to wean at 60 days. I'll repeat that probably several times, but W means basically the 60-day fecal egg count, and P would be post-weaning or somewhere between 120 and 150-day fecal egg count. And the two numbers can be correlated. You don't have to collect fecal egg counts at both. So you collect your fecal egg counts when you have a challenge. And so then can you explain a little bit more about USA maternal hair and maternal weaning weight? Yeah, so, okay, so USA maternal hair is a maternal index, and we're trying to get hair off of that, but because of the robustness or the size of the database, the geneticists have actually determined that the calculation for a maternal index in wool sheep is a little different than the calculations for a maternal index in hair sheep. And so within NSIP, we have a maternal wool index and we have a maternal hair index, just simply signifying that there's a difference in those two indexes, but it's heavily weighted to number of lambs weaned. And again, it's really an index, roughly speaking, again, trying to stay out of the weeds here. Just assume that 100 would be average. And so if you're at 101, that ewe is or the sire or what, that animal, it would be predicted to have a breeding value that would produce the number of pounds of lambs weaned in a litter would be 1% more than the average. And it's really a measure of pounds of lambs weaned per ewe lambing. And then milk is, okay, that's, again, you almost need Dr. Ron Lewis here to explain it, and it would take him about an hour. But roughly, milk is the difference when the geneticists saw early on that they could predict weaning weight sometimes, but not always. Well, that not always occurs because of the maternal instincts of the youth. And so about 80%, and it varies. It's a little bit, this is kind of fuzzy math. Maybe it's new math. I don't know. But the best way to understand it is that some ewes either produce a lot more milk than other ewes, and so their lambs are bigger than you would anticipate they should be, based upon their growth genetics. Sometimes, though, it's the maternal behavior that maybe the ewe doesn't milk more. The way I like to explain it, if you've ever watched a ewe, some ewes keep their lambs like almost like chickens. Okay, the hen keeps the chickens, under her wings. There are some ewes that I've noticed that the lambs never wander off. They're always next to mama. They're nursing all the time. And then there's other lambs that I don't know that if they ever find their mama back, they're just stealing milk from whoever they can. So sometimes where milk is a maternal trait, sometimes it's actual milk production. And so that's why it's calculated. But it's the higher the number, you can be assured that ewes are either better mothers or they're better milkers. And it's really it's a calculated difference between what the computer anticipates the genetic growth merit is of an animal versus what they actually do. And so that's probably more than I needed to say, but that's an explanation.
Another way to put it is that Pine Bluff is so amazing that it's able to simultaneously predict how much a lamb should grow from all the relatives' growth and so forth. And if it grows faster than its genetics for growth is predicted, then that gives its dam a plus for milk, a maternal weaning weight. If it grows less than what the genetics predicts, then it's going to give a negative for maternal milk. And over time, it gives you an idea of milk and maternal behavior both. So it's like they can't differentiate the milk from the maternal behavior, but it's usually 80% milk.
Thanks, Jen. Lori, I hope that helped.
Thank you. That was perfect.
Okay, CB has a question with the Barbados black belly. With 12 to 15 ewes and two rams and 10 ewes with such low numbers, can breeders benefit from participation? I'd say yes. I think, over it to get accuracy, get good accuracies, to get more robust data will just take you a few more years. It's really just a mass of data situation, and so if it takes you a little longer, you're still moving in the right direction would be my answer. Oh, okay, Crystal, the last Robert got the time zone wrong. You are recording this and it will be posted, right?
Yeah, I just answered him in the chat
Okay.
too.
Okay.
Yeah, it will be sent out to everyone who registered. It will come to you in an email, but it will also be on our YouTube channel and shared on our website and Facebook page. I wanted to mention something, and this is a common thing that I hear regarding fecal egg count EBVs. I think it's important because that range really matters. So in my flock, my highest EBV or my highest raw FEC count was only 1850. So while that one ram, it looks like, oh my gosh, he's terrible, he's not parasite resistant. Well, his one lamb, and that was the outlier, one lamb, it only got up to 1850. So that's one thing I think where we have to be cautious in trying to compare our EBV numbers to like the Katahdin EBV numbers, especially in FECs. in the FEC EBV, because I can't get the range. I mean, I just can't. And I've tried. I put them on terrible pasture, left them longer than they should have been left. And that was the worst egg count I could get. So.
Yeah, good point, Crystal. And yeah, it's a tough trait. So obviously, and this is and it's actually a great example of why, if you're sharing genetics, so if a son of that ram was used on a different farm, then that son's data is also being added back in to that ram. And so then you start using it on more farm. You get, again, these genetic linkages are so important. You'll start truly separating out, the true genetic value of each animal. I don't know. I can stay on all night. We're getting close to an hour, but let me see if I can share my screen again, and we'll go back and we'll look at the software called Pedigree Master. And
Loading that, Amy had a quick question about
go ahead,
little
Amy.
flock.
What's the question, Amy?
She typed it. It says her flock is very small. She only has 5 to 7 St. Croix with 2 rams and 9 Katahdin with 1 ram. She does try to buy rams with EBVs in mind, but the data just isn't there yet for St. Croix. But she's wondering if it would make any sense at all for her little flock to join.
Jim can probably chime in here, but if you've got 2 rams, even if you don't have 15 lambs per ram, it was kind of like my answer earlier. It's just going to take longer to get the massive data that you're going to be comfortable with. But if you have 2 rams, I think I would probably consider, understanding it's going to be, you're probably spending more money. The other question is can you recoup your cost? And that's one of the reasons why I said, if you're a commercial operation, I think it's just better to buy animals with EBVs, because it's harder for you to recoup your cost because you're not using it as a marketing tool with customers. If you're just going to the sale barn, the buyer doesn't care. And so it's harder to recoup that fixed cost of the NSIP enrollment. So that has to be taken into account. I mean, I can sit here all day and say, well, just spend longer and wait more years and you're going to have good results. You have to pay for it in the meantime, and so that has to be a personal decision.
The other thing I would say is use the same with those 2 rams. I'd use them for a couple years, and then then trade out one, and then go forward. But it's going to take, so you'll take 2 to 3 years to get your 15, 20 lambs per sire. That's probably one of the ways to put it.
Okay, so real briefly, Pedigree Master is a little bit of a clunky program. It's not flashy, but it is free. You can, if you join NSIP, you'll get an onboarding packet email from Rusty Burchett, and there'll be a link in there. You can download this program. And honestly, I think for small flocks, it's really not a bad flock management program. It's just not as flashy. It's more like it's an MS-DOS program that's kind of been adapted to Windows. It will not work on Apples. I will say that. But anyway, it's really not bad. And so you can go under pedigree and displays. And so here's so for this lamb, 64-0 is Katahdin's, and I was the 30th flock. This lamb was born, or animal was born in 2020, and lamb number 15. You can see the sire and the dam, and it was well, so now right here's a well, unless it was, this could have been a bottle lamb. So birth type was a triplet, rear type was a 0. So that's that may be a mistake. But anyway, under the, well, I chose a bad one here.
It shows him as dead.
Yeah, it should, yeah.
Yeah, on the other screen it showed
Okay,
it.
let me go to a different, there we go. This is 3 and 2. Okay. I might have just moved my cursor down to the wrong animal. And so, okay, so here's, well, I thought I had a great example for y'all. Here we go. Okay, so it was this one here, lamb 10 was born on January the 19th. We took a 60-day weight on April, which is more than 60 days. It must have been at the top end of the range, because there's a range, acceptable range is 40 to 120. So yeah, it was 83 days old when I weighed it. And then here is post weaning weight. And this was back when I was scanning. And so I've got a back fat measurement and an eye muscle or loin muscle depth measurement. Then you can go to reproduction, and let me see. This is a U. Let's see if I kept her. No, I did not. But if she had any lambs, the lambs would be listed here. Let's see if there we go. And then breeding values. And so this is a chart of all the breeding values. We got weights all the way up through hogget. We got EBVs for fat and eye muscle depth, scrotal circumference, weaning fecal egg count, and they use the term worm egg count in Australia. So there's that, but this top number, the -30, would be the 60-day fecal egg count. The -55 would be post-weaning fecal egg count. A lot of these indexes over here we don't even deal with. They're Australian indexes, but here is the hair maternal index for hair sheep. It's a 101.75. Down here is number of lambs born, would be 2.2%. Number of lambs weaned, 7.8%. And milk or maternal weaning weight would be a 0.17. So, and you can type in visual notes if you want. But the important thing about this management program, if you use Excel for your data, there's actually a spreadsheet that will help you upload data to Pedigree Master. And then here's the important thing is the validation. And so you need to validate your data before you submit it for analysis. And this will check, you know, my thick fingers sometimes, I'll type down that a lamb weighed 140 pounds at 60 days instead of 40. I put down 140. It catches, this validation routine will catch those types of mistakes. It'll catch if a ewe lambs twice within a contemporary group. Maybe it lambed on January the 10th, and then you make a mistake and you say it lambed again on, February the 20th. And it'll catch some of those errors so you can correct them before you send your data off. So I know, there are some reports. So if I can scroll down. So like if I So you can, you can get some reports. So like I said, it's not a bad program, and actually for some small flocks, you may find it very useful. Data files. I mean, there's an example of the database, and I mean, I don't know, there's 200 or 300 columns in here, and we don't use very many of them. A lot of them are wool traits, but again, like if you're using an Excel spreadsheet, if your headings up here are identical, it's pretty easy to import a spreadsheet of this year's lamb data into Pedigree Master so you can validate it before you send it off. So that's, if you hear about Pedigree Master, this is it. Somewhere that's, yeah. Rusty is really good at helping people that use Excel to adopt or adapt their Excel files to NSIP. But anyway, so that's a really quick look at Pedigree Master. Any other questions about anything tonight, or is everyone tired?
Yates asked a question about
Let me
using different RAMs.
okay. Yes, Yates. Actually, I do that. Yes. Yeah, again, I don't want to get real technical tonight. The main thing is if you have, as long as you know who the ram is and the dam. And one of the things that we found with genomic data, and that this is way beyond what we need to talk about tonight, except for this point. When we started to do genomic analysis in Katahdins, and we get parentage back, and we've learned to give everybody some grace. Sometimes, I'll walk out into the barn and there's two ewes that are next to each other, and they're both having baby lambs, and I think I've got the right lamb with the right ewe, and both ewes accept the lambs I gave them, and I have found I've been wrong. Then the other thing, and so, if we can, genomics makes the data better, but again, I'm not saying you have to use genomics, but I'm using that as an example that we need, as long as you can identify the rams and the ewes to the correct lamb as well as you can, the system works. And then the contemporary group really is more age. It's really about a 34-day window. So if you use 2 rams for 17 days and then combine your ewes into one group with 1 ram, that doesn't necessarily mean they need to be in 2 contemporary groups. I hope I'm answering your question and not reading more into that than I should have. So.
We've had a couple of questions about getting fecal egg counts done. And I was just giving the folks a good way to get them done for pretty cheap is through Dr. Bodridge at WVU. It's only $5 a sample. If you live in the Mid-Atlantic, the University of Rhode Island has a program where if you are a member of NSIP, they will do them for free. So that's how I get mine done. So that's kind of why I look at it. And my NSIP membership is free because I get to have all of those FECs done for free. Yeah. And those usually cost, so.
Yeah, I'll tell you, most vets, they know how to look into a microscope and tell you if you have worm eggs or not, but they don't know actually how to count the different species. So you really need to go and send them to a trained lab.
Yeah.
So the American Consortium has a list of the NSIP of the vets in the country that do fecal leg counts for $5.
Okay.
So San Angelo, Texas A&M San Angelo does it for $5. Scott Bowdridge at West Virginia's, as was mentioned, and then also Rhode Island. That I think, and there's a period in there where Virginia Tech, I think, also is doing them for the summer, but at $5. So there's several places, and most vets will charge you 20, and it may not be it may not be masters.
Yeah. They just say, yes, they have worms. Oh, okay, thanks. Of course they do.
Yates, flock 54 would be a great way to determine that. I like flock 54 for parentage and maybe a couple other things. It's using different technology. You'll hear about Katahdin's, we use a Neogen chip. It's a bead chip. Flock 54 is a sequencing chip or sequenced chip. The number of markers are different. Someday, as sequencing gets more robust, I'm sure, we'll hopefully yeah, I won't bear enough. Just stay out of the weeds there. But I like flock 54 for parentage.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll give you some conditions as well. I haven't actually looked at the output for a while, but I think it'll give you scrapie and some others. I don't know if it'll give you TMEM 154 yet. The new chip, the new flock 54 might. So but anyway, I appreciate this. Crystal, I did not put my contact information on my slideshow, but feel free to share my contact information on your website.
Okay.
And if anybody wants to reach out, glad to help anybody I can.
No more questions?
Oh, I guess I will say NSIP's website is nsip.org. If you go to nsip.com, it's some sort of lung disease, I think. So, so it's nsip.org, and that's where the enrollment form is located.
And if any of you guys decide you want to join, and you need some help, I'm not, I've only been doing it now I'm in my 3rd year, but please reach out. I'm more than happy to help you out. It's not as hard as it sounds, and I think the cost for me has absolutely been worth it. It makes my life easier, because just like I think Lynn described exactly what I do, I take my list with my EBVs and I just automatically just know these are the bottom feeders, and I don't even need to look at them anymore. They're gone. And then I go and I look at the top ones, and then I make my visual appraisals off of those top ones. So that's been very helpful to me, especially someone who's also relatively new just in sheep in general, because it was overwhelming to go out there and look at all these lambs running around and try to figure out which ones are good and which ones are bad. It limits the numbers that you have to examine.
Okay, Lynn, I'm going to ask another question because that's just me. So Crystal has a lot of my St. Croix genetics.
Yeah.
And if I were to get some of my St. Croix back, not from Crystal, or if I have Dorpers that are related to other Dorpers in NSIP, say I buy a son of another producer's flock, how does that factor
yes,
in anywhere?
Yeah, no, it helps. And Okay, so this is something that we kind of have to sit down and work through, but okay, and there's a limit to how practical we can go back into a pedigree.
Mhm.
But let's, here, let me share screen again. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So y'all can, this is a pedigree within Pedigree Master. And if you wanted to, Yates, if you knew that way out here, 5 generations back from your current flock is a lamb or an animal that would connect to Crystal's flock or to someone else's flock that might join NSIP, we can recreate this database so that one of these animals ties back into your current flock. So you don't actually have to get the animal back. That would perhaps be nice, but we can we don't have to recreate the entire database, but we can, going back 1 or 2 generations is not hard. And that will give you an automatic instant link to another flock. So, and then on the Dorper question, the only thing I'm going to say there is that if y'all are crossbreeding St. Croix and Dorpers, we need to talk about the contemporary group structure a little bit more. You can still submit, 50%.
Then I would put them in as 2 flocks, St. Croix flock and Dorper flock. I wouldn't put them in as a crossbred.
Okay.
I can only do so many things.
Within the Katahdin breed, we have some producers that are using Texels. And of course, the Katahdin flock book is open, so we have an upgrading program. And those people can still participate in NSIP, but we need to make sure that we keep especially the 50% crossbreds in a different contemporary group than 100% purebreds, because we don't want to be measuring hybrid vigor within NSIP. Well, NSIP does not have at the current time a good way to handle hybrid vigor. So we've got to handle these 50% crossbreds and even the 75% crossbreds a little carefully, but the data is still valuable. And so, we need to talk through that if very many of y'all are doing it. But if you have a Dorper flock and a St. Croix flock, yes, that we are getting more and more Dorper breeders all the time in NSIP. And again, if it makes sense, we can recreate a pedigree when you join. Or if you have an animal that's a generation removed from a flock that's in NSIP, there was just a gap, then we can fill in that gap. It takes a little bit of time. It may take some phone calls. We'll work with Rusty for sure on that, so we're always consistent. But that is certainly possible because there's value to doing that.
Yeah, so when I first joined, I made sure to enter, and since I was the only member, I'm the only person, I could make whatever number I wanted.
Yeah.
I made sure to enter the pedigrees at least far back enough that it showed where I had cousins and sisters and grandfathers, and so that all of them were linked. So to answer your question about your sheep, Yates, if the ones you're getting back of yours are linked to Jasper or Lily at all in their pedigrees, then we can, it's pretty simple to just make sure we get all of those animals in, and then they're linked.
Or if I get a Jasper son.
Yeah, too. Yeah.
Because I know he's not coming back west.
No.
Yates, are your Dorpers linked to Paul and Kathy Lewis's, or other
No,
dor-
mine are Dorpers, not white Dorpers.
Okay,
Is very active in his stuff, sending it straight to the Australian
right.
registry.
But it was still connected to the white Dorpers in the US, even though it was separate.
Yes.
Yeah, and the and I don't about whether most of the Dorpers are out of Texas. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, just try to find Dorper breeders that are active and linked to. If you're buying linkage animals, then you'll get the most out of it.
Well, it's an interesting, I consider this one of my tools for my flock. And it's an interesting concept for me. Who else is in NSIP and what have they got and what can that do for me? That's a total, I mean, it's production oriented, and that's one of the things that we really, I mean, we need our sheep to produce. So if this is the way to quantify production. And so that's just, it'll be interesting to see what happens as I transition into looking at that, and hopefully more people will do NSIP.
Yeah. It's, I can go out and make a really nice looking sheep by giving it a lot of grain. And that's fine in some situations. I'm not saying that's wrong, but we're judging an animal's merit based upon how well it ate out of a feed bucket, or maybe it's how well I manage my grass. And I've already said I don't manage grass well at all. But with NSIP, we're removing the environmental effect and looking at just the genetics. And genetic improvement tends to be permanent and compounding. And so management can mask a lot, but long term, I think we want to keep making genetic progress in our flocks in the direction that's economically viable for our market. And I think the market and the goals of a flock that's selling 140-pound lambs to a specialty restaurant are totally different than the production goals of a flock that's selling 60-pound lambs to an ethnic buyer at the local sale barn. And we need to, if they're both flocks are making money, we need to applaud both flocks, and we need to help them find the animals that they need to help them become even better. And I think that's what we can do with NSIP.
Scotty, I can't believe you've been this quiet. Well, that's it for everyone. I appreciate you guys joining us. And as I said, this will be posted. If you missed something, you can go back and watch it again. I posted a link to a kind of a feedback survey. I would really appreciate it if you would take just a couple of minutes to fill that out as we try to plan future webinars. That's very helpful. So thank you, Lynn, very much.
You're welcome.
Bye, everybody.